November 2024. Donald Trump has just been re-elected as President of the United States. For many Canadians, this moment feels like deja vu. Memories of trade wars, tariffs, and tense diplomacy from his first term come flooding back. But Trump's re-election isn't just about today. It's a reminder of the complicated, sometimes rocky, sometimes bizarre history between the two countries. So here is the question. Are these two countries besties forever, or are they just good at pretending to get along? Our country, our world, is changing at an accelerating pace, faster and faster. It may feel disconnected, like hurtling through a maelstrom, but when you peel back the layers, unpack the pieces, you start to see the Canadian connections. Let's start at the beginning. Canada and the U.S. were not always peaceful neighbors. During the American Revolution, the colonies tried to get Canada, then British North America, to join the rebellion, but Canadians decided, nah, we're good. In 1775, rebel forces invaded Canada, occupying Montreal and attacking the town of Quebec. American privateers also raided Atlantic ports, and revolutionary sympathizers in Nova Scotia attempted a rebellion in that colony. The rebel forces were quickly defeated in Canada. After the successful American Revolution, many Empire loyalists found themselves in very unfriendly territory. Quite a few fled north to Canada. My own forefathers, 5 generations back, fled to Ernstown in what would become Ontario. These loyalists would play a critical role in the next war, holding very anti-American views, which would help galvanize Canadian resistance to the American invaders. Cross-border tensions boiled over in 1812 when the United States launched a full-scale invasion of Canada. Britain had its hands full with the Napoleonic Wars in Europe when America sacked York, the capital of Upper Canada, now Toronto, Ontario. 2,700 American soldiers defeated the 750 British and Ojibwa Indians defending Fort York. They looted the town and set fire to public buildings, including Parliament and Government House. Canadian militias, British troops, and Indigenous allies, including leaders like Tecumseh, pushed them back. In retaliation, British and Canadian troops marched into Washington, D.C. on August 24, 1814, and set the White House, Capitol, and other federal buildings on fire. The following day, the arson continued until a drenching 2-hour thunderstorm extinguished the flames. The Americans are still on about that, but they seem to forget the sacking of York. During the same war, Canadian forces thwarted an American attack at Beaver Dams in Ontario, largely due to Laura Secord. After hearing American attack plans, Secord stole away from her home and hiked 32 kilometers overnight to warn the British and their native allies, who were able to capture the entire American force. So yeah, not exactly a friendly beginning. The post-war period didn't exactly smooth things over. The two states were constantly arguing about the border, in disputes like the Oregon Territory dispute. During the 1844 presidential election, Americans were rallying behind the slogan 5440 or fight, referring to the latitude of southern Alaska, and demanding all the land between. Cooler heads eventually settled on the 49th parallel. That worked on the mainland, but was confused by the many islands in the waters that separate Vancouver Island and the U.S. The question nearly flared into all-out war in 1859 over an incident known as the Pig War. The border dispute over the San Juan Islands, jointly occupied by the Canadians and Americans, started when an American farmer shot a Canadian-owned pig that had wandered into his garden. The conflict escalated as both countries began deploying troops to the area. Luckily, it ended without a single human casualty, although the pig was less fortunate. And then there were the Fenian raids. Irish-American nationalists crossed into Canada multiple times in the 1860s, hoping to pressure Britain into freeing Ireland. While these raids weren't U.S. government-sponsored, they left Canadians nervous about their southern neighbor. In 1861, things got complicated again. this time because of the American Civil War. While Canada officially stayed neutral, many Canadians were sympathetic to the Union's cause. But Britain, still ruling Canada, leaned towards the Confederacy, creating friction. One major flashpoint was the Confederacy's use of British-built ships, like the notorious CSS Alabama, which raided Union vessels. Americans were furious, and some blamed Canada as part of Britain's empire. Then there was the St. Albans raid in 1864, when Confederate soldiers launched an attack from Canadian soil, robbing banks in Vermont, forcing tellers to swear allegiance to the Confederacy, and killing an American citizen. The raiders escaped back to Canada, where courts refused to extradite them to the U.S. That didn't exactly strengthen ties. In fact, during the Civil War, the U.S. even stationed troops along the Canadian border, worried that Britain, or Confederate sympathizers in Canada, might interfere. While war between the United States and Canada did not break out, the distrust lingered for years. Fast forward to the 20th century, and things start to improve. By World War II, Canada and the U.S. were allies, working together to defeat the Axis powers. The Ogdensburg Agreement in 1940 formalized their defense cooperation, setting the stage for NORAD during the Cold War. Now these two countries were protecting North America together. This partnership transformed them from rivals into real partners. But if there's one thing that truly binds Canada and America together, other than our shared border, it's trade. The two countries are each other's biggest trading partners, with millions of dollars crossing the border daily. The 1965 Auto Pact integrated their car industries, and NAFTA, later CUSMA, cemented these economic ties. By 2023, the total value of goods and services traded between Canada and the U.S. is $774 billion, making the two countries each other's largest trading partners. Of course, it wasn't always smooth sailing. In the 1990s, a trade dispute over softwood lumber led to odd retaliations. Canada imposed tariffs on U.S.-made pizza toppings. This unusual response became a running joke known as the Pizza War, but underscored the high stakes of trade disagreements. More recently, President Trump's first term saw tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, apparently because Canada was a security threat to the USA. There was a tense renegotiation of NAFTA. And don't get me started on softwood lumber disputes. We've been arguing about trees for decades. As Pierre Trudeau, one of Canada's most famous prime ministers, once said,
"Living next to you is in some ways like sleeping with an elephant. No matter how friendly or even tempered is the beast, one is affected by every twitch and grunt."
Canada's smaller size and economic dependence on the U.S. means it's often adjusting to the bigger country's moves. Sometimes that's a good thing, other times not so much. Even best friends disagree. During the Vietnam War, Canada refused to participate and became a haven for American draft dodgers. Washington wasn't thrilled, and the episode highlighted the country's differences in foreign policy. It happened again in 2003. When George W. Bush called on allies to join the US-led invasion of Iraq, then Prime Minister Jean Chrétien said no. Chrétien argued that the invasion lacked United Nations approval and that Canada wouldn't participate without stronger evidence of weapons of mass destruction. The decision caused friction with Washington, but many Canadians saw it as a defining moment of independence from their larger neighbor. It reinforced that while our nations are close, they are not carbon copies of each other. And yet, when tragedy struck on 9/11, Canada stepped up, hosting thousands of stranded passengers in Gander, Newfoundland, and other places. This remarkable episode was turned into the smash Broadway hit Come From Away. Moments like this remind us how deeply connected these two nations are. Canada and the U.S. also work together on shared concerns, from cleaning up the Great Lakes in the 70s to tackling acid rain in the 80s. Environmental cooperation has been a major success story. And now, with climate change and Arctic sovereignty on the agenda, and threats from bellicose nations increasing, this partnership is more important than ever. So, are Canada and America besties forever? Maybe. Like any friendship, it's complicated. We've had our fights and given each other the cold shoulder, but we also share a border, values, and a long history. Truth is, neither country can pick up and move. We must keep finding ways to work together, whether on trade, security, or the environment. Canadians often feel the friendship is lopsided, with America holding all the cards. But over 200 years, Canada has survived and thrived, often because America ignores or underestimates Canadian resolve and resourcefulness.
Geography has made us neighbors. History has made us friends. Economics has made us partners. And necessity has made us allies. Those whom nature has so joined together, let no man put asunder.
Regardless of how we feel, we must find ways, will find ways, to make it work for both countries, even if the elephant occasionally twitches.